Welcome to the bold analysis, ladies and gentlemen. William Ruto and diplomacy ni maji na mafuta. Last month, I analyzed a tweet by Ndindi Nyoro and Moses Kuria, all taking a predetermined position about the Sudan war. And most of us want the country that we were actually joking with something that would actually put us in some diplomatic problem, give us some diplomatic problems. But now the report coming now is that imeturamba tena. William Ruto suffered another rejection. Now, this is what has happened. There is an independent Post, Sudan Post, which is an independent newspaper, newslet in Sudan. It is saying, Albonan rejects Ruto as head of IGAD mediation, says Kir is the right person. So this is what happened. IGAD had, which is an intergovernmental body, picked picked President Salva Kiir Mayardit as the head of the IGAD mediation team on the Sudanese conflict. In a communication on Tuesday marking the end of IGAD summit in Djibouti, the regional bloc, which also mediated South Africa's peace agreement, said that Kenyan president will take over from Kiir, who was assigned immediately following the outbreak of the Sudanese conflict. So William Ruto was recently in Djibouti. So during the meeting in Djibouti, the IGAD meeting in Djibouti, Ruto was given the responsibility to head. And I remember seeing William Ruto's team here not giving a lot of credit by the fact that he's been given that responsibility. And we had a chit chat by my lecturer on why is it that Kenya Kwanza were not talking and they were not praising, rather magnifying that story that William Ruto has been picked to lead IGAD, because that would have been used to boost illegitimacy question in terms of how he is really recognized in the region. But in a statement on Tuesday, the Sudanese Foreign Ministry expressed disagreement with the decision of the regional bloc and demanded that President Salva Kiir Mayardit is maintained as the head of the mediation team. Now, this is something that has then just come out now. And on this, I am not a bit shocked by this development. The reason why I'm not shocked is I think William Ruto recently made this statement in South Africa, and I do feel it was a bit reckless.
A case in point, we have a situation in Sudan. The generals in Sudan are bombing everything. They are bombing roads, they are bombing bridges, they are bombing hospitals, they are destroying airports, using military hardware bought by African money. Just imagine. We need to tell those generals to stop the nonsense. Yeah. Military capacity is for fighting criminals and terrorists. It is not for fighting children and women and destroying our own infrastructure. But as it is, we have no capacity to stop this nonsense in our own continent because our own peace and security fund is funded by others. We have a problem. But I'm telling you, we are going to correct this problem. It is us to do it.
Now, this one was talking about the soldiers, on what exactly had happened there, and was talking when he was, I think it was a Pan-African speech, and he was trying to dismiss the soldiers on that. And I think I support him truly, that Africa is destroying itself by those war, they are burning bridges and burning what has been. It is really true. But again, as a country and as someone who is really a head of state, I think that statement would rather come from somewhere hapa chini, or even an opposition candidate or some Pan-Africanists, that even PLO Lumumba, than to come from the president. Because I looked at it like, fine, if we already taken a position and we're already making that, how are we going to help? Before we go further, I just want to, I'll have to revisit the whole discussion, because there is also a rebuttal from the Kenyan government. I've seen a rebuttal from Foreign Affairs. There are some 4 reasons about this. William Ruto, I still want to believe that William Ruto could have lobbied to be given that opportunity, because as you know now, President Uhuru Kenyatta has been making tremendous strides in peacekeeping mission in the region. And yes, it was not part of it, but I think William Ruto would also want to rival his former boss. But there has been the politics of our age this time, and he would have really wanted to take up that position, apart from maybe personal benefits that will come with it, which I want to believe is also at the center of this rejection, because there is a lot of money in it. And if you are ahead, of course, someone was going to benefit, even financially. Personally, as the president, you're also going to benefit. Both the IGAD body and even, you will be shocked, even a budget from our country will go into that. And those books will then be reconciled later. So the President, William Ruto, number one, wanted it to rival Uhuru Kenyatta. I think Uhuru Kenyatta has built a very good profile in the region on peacekeeping mission. Number two, it's also for boosting legitimacy. You know, there have been the whole question about legitimacy. So he needed, because they would actually go there, and at the success of it would take the credit. But I think even President William Ruto's handlers knew very well that there were some murmurs about that position. Number three, the other reason why President William Ruto also wanted it is just to, to use it for international network, to get that network. Of course, you will actually realize that we've really had a huge budget in the president's office in terms of moving here and there. But that statement from president in South Africa, you also look at it. You also look at how Ndindi Nyoro and Moses Kuria reacted to this war. You will actually realize that Kenyan government, they seem to have had some predetermined position on this. The two factions fighting, there is a civilian faction and there is the military, some military faction. So there is a bit of how it has been happening. And if you remember, the war did not even, this is not the first attempt. The first attempt was in Dubai. There was a Dubai meeting that brought together the two leaders, the two warring factions in Sudan. And even after signing some ceasefire, because the first stage was to have some ceasefire to allow for penetration of humanitarian aid to address the humanitarian crisis in the region, in the country, the Dubai deal collapsed. Yes, the Dubai deal collapsed. And immediately it collapsed. I think last weekend, the country again plunged back, rolled back to violence. And I was wondering then, IGAD then was coming in after making that attempt. But we made a blunder. And I think it's a good lesson to the know it all in the office of the president. William Ruto lately has been trying to make, when you look at his speeches in the continent, he's been trying to pull a Pan-Africanist card. But again, I remember the way he had the outburst about how Africa is being treated. It is a very populist in the region, and of course, not in the region, but in the continent. And of course, is to, gather momentum and also get the visibility just across Africa, across Kenya, beyond Kenya, which is a good gesture. But on some instant, I think we've crossed the red line. And one of the reasons why Ruto has suffered this rejection is profiling of those soldiers. If you want ceasefire, and there are two warring factions, in already in that situation, you cannot take a stand. And you've already profiled some faction as now these are fellas that are very useless and what they're doing is wrong. How would you really be in a position to convince me that these people are going to listen to you? So one of the reasons that we've done is profiling the soldiers. The whole continent, and a logical person, in logical reasoning, what the soldiers are doing is not right. But already it's there. The war is already going on. So you cannot end it. You cannot end it by going confrontational. You must first appreciate maybe what is the problem going on. And if you've already dismissed them as nonsense, how are they going to listen to you? And I wanted to analyze that speech in South Africa, especially when it stated that that nonsense need to stop. It's true that's nonsense. But again, some things are rather not said. Yes. The truthful man, that should come from Rigathi Gachagua speaking somewhere in the slopes of Mount Kenya Hapa, or when speaking in some coffee conference, or speaking somewhere in the country. But as president saying that in South Africa, I honestly had an opinion that we had crossed the red line. Number two, the Sudan crisis has some bit of vested international interests. And I asked a question. US is also trying their bit, but the Dubai meeting might have collapsed because of the West and the East interest, because there was a bit of that understanding. One of the few things that people are fighting for in South Sudan is the oil. So there was that understanding in Sudan, not South Sudan, in Sudan. There was that understanding that the Dubai mediation talks collapsed because of those vested interests. Now, William Ruto in the country has also projected himself as a man who embraces the US side, the Europe side. And I think because of those vested interests, that is another reason why Ruto is not being seen as a neutral arbiter. As much as he's leading those mediation talks, but he's also not being seen as a man with the one that can really bring them together. Being that they tried, and he might be a proxy. In fact, I was just reading another report before I even started that was showing that the way President William Ruto was picked to replace Salva Kiir was very controversial, because despite of the fact that Salva Kiir is the one that really did the attempt, and he was the person behind the first signing that was done, ceasefire that was done, that had failed, and the report was showing that there was no assessment on the failure of Salva Kiir to deliver on that mandate. But the decision on why Salva Kiir was then to be dropped for William Ruto borders some lobbying. And I want to say, this is about lobbying. This is about lobbying. And I think it will be very easy to pick. It will be better for Kiir than President Ruto, even though you can also not underestimate his credentials to do the mediation. Now, well, the other thing I see here is President Ruto must then accept one thing, that his legitimacy, acceptability in the region is still questionable. It's still questionable. I know that there are some interests. The country is a landlocked country. The Sudan is a landlocked country. And the two, they either use the port of Djibouti, is it the port of Djibouti or this one of Mombasa? So Kenya is also a very strategic partner in terms of even how goods are getting there, how they're getting their products. Kenya is a very strategic partner. But if you see them making that brave decision of the country rejecting William Ruto, then it's a very clear message. Because one would argue that why would South Sudan reject President William Ruto while majority of all their imports pass through Kenya, through the Mombasa border? And it's a very clear message that they are not afraid of the diplomatic war and they will be able to move to Djibouti port. Because that's also one of the interests. And I need to give credit where it's due. This is a very good input from Dr. Mutua. He's a very good friend of mine. Not Mutua that you know, another one. So, from US. He was telling me about that aspect, that the fact that this can come out and they can reject President Ruto is also a clear message that it doesn't matter. Even if they can lose the deal at the border, they will be willing to go to Djibouti. And remember, just 2 weeks ago, there was a discussion about reviewing the contract from the port, Mombasa port. I think that discussion is going on somewhere. Are we really wrong to say that there are also elements or there are also other considerations that do President William Ruto have peacekeeping credentials, have the mediation credentials, or just because he's a president? I am a bit cagey on that. Does he have? Has he done it? Has it shown? You know, just there was a bipartisan talks in this country just recently, and it was collapsed by the administration selfishly for politics. So if just a simple bipartisan talks in the country between Kenya Kwanza and Azimio could not collapse, it collapsed because of interest, does he really have the credential to mediate the peace? To some extent, I want to look at it as if he's overrated. I don't think he would be able to bring it. If the Dubai team, who has superpowers, brought it together, tried and it failed, we may need to make some very important considerations moving forward. Now, I need to make some clarification here. The Foreign Affairs has responded. Foreign Affairs PS responded to Sudan rejecting Ruto as head of peace talks, saying Principal Secretary for Foreign Affairs Corel Singe responded to the reports claiming that Sudan was opposed to President William Ruto leading mediation talks seeking to restore peace and tranquility in the warring nation. Singe argued that Intergovernmental IGAD was the only authority that could revoke the appointment. So how IGAD revoked the appointment of Salva Kiir for William Ruto is also something that is here. Not for official communication, but both the inclusion of Prime Minister of Federal Republic of Ethiopia, Abiy Ahmed, to the Troika, mandated to seek peace in Sudan, and appointment of President Ruto to lead the quartet was arrived at the IGAD summit and can only be vacated by the summit. So what is it? Whose side are the soldiers? This is a very clear point that we might have made a blunder. We overspoke, we over-talked about the Sudan war, and it showed that maybe we are not honest about it. That's my take.